What's going on? This is E40, the one and only 40 Water, with the soundtrack for the town, shouting out BAMFest 2021 International. Produced by the Lower Bottoms Players, BAMFest 2021 International from Oakland to the world, live from the Black Arts Movement District in West Oakland. Sponsored by Earl Stevens Fine Wines, man. You know what I'm talking about? Support the culture.
Your life, see we coming with that light force, bunk it down in the town, praying that it takes its course, reminiscing on the beautiful places, the different faces, exotic stages, this music takes us high for real. I know that fear for real, but still, they say love is the answer, they say love is the way. Listen the world, I hope I see you again someday. Isolation, trying to find the right words to say. I love you. To the rest of the world, from Oakland to the rest of the world.
BAMFest 2021 International is 31 days of arts, culture, education, civic discourse, and networking events offered as a community celebration of our legacy of resilience, our massive reservoir of talent, and our legendary determination for equity and justice for Black people. BAMFest 2021 is a hybrid event offering both virtual and live programming. The festival is presented by the Black Arts Movement Business District, Community Development Corporation, and produced by Oakland's premier North American African Theater Company, Lower Bottom Players. Under the artistic direction of Ayodele Nzinga, MFA, PhD, the Poet Laureate of Oakland. For most information on festival programming, please head to BAMFest.com.
What's happening, family? It's Kat Brooks coming to you live from BAMFest. We are in our third week. We got 2 more weeks left, and every Monday we've been doing Kat's commentary with special guests. Today's guest is my friend, my comrade, my sister, the People's Champion, the People's Council Member, District 3 Representative Carol Fife. Good morning, sis. How are you?
Good morning. I'm excited I get to talk to you for an extended period of time.
Right, because that like legit does not happen anymore. I even got to see you. I got to see you on Saturday at the Shock G tribute.
Yeah, it was dope.
That was beautiful. That was really beautiful. Talk to me about the proclamation and Shock G Day.
Well, I was honored to be a part of this proclamation. It was initiated by Councilmember Lauren Taylor, and I supported it because it's in alignment with what I'm trying to really lift up during my tenure in Black arts. I think it's one thing to do the honoring once people pass away. And I thought it was really important to be a part of that. And I'm also very active in trying to gather resources and create a process to honor and uplift and nurture artists while they're here. I made that commitment to Oakland's own Lunel when she helped me write the tribute to Paul Mooney when he passed away earlier this year. And it just seems like we keep losing folks, and not just through the way we typically lose folks through displacement and gentrification and losing folks to the streets or whatever, but also through death. And so, you know, I want to honor Black life while people can, you know, appreciate their roses in our presence and while they're living. So that was just another example of like it was too late. It was too late. It was important, but it was too late. So let's create a process where we're doing that before people pass away.
And on Saturday at the tribute, you talked about it being something like Hollywood's Walk of Fame, but
Yeah, it's something I was thinking about. Yeah, what do you, I don't know, what, I want your thoughts. I want all artists' thoughts. I want people to talk about what does it look like to honor artists and creatives.
I love that idea. I love all of the pictures, the murals that are downtown, right, that sprung up organically, right, in the aftermath of the rebellions following the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I think that that's one way. I like the idea, but you know, I'm bougie like that. Some sort of Walk of Fame. Um, I, I would love to see a place for artists where we can actually be, right? Like revitalizing 7th Street in West Oakland, right?
Right.
In
Right.
honoring our history there, our history of Black artistry in particular. But we need a home. Like artists need a place to perform, to have studio time, to
Right.
fellowship with each other, to create, to share our work. And it's just really hard to find those spaces. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I that's why I put in the funds in the budget for the revitalization, the feasibility study for the Malanga Center. I think, you know, my kids took tap lessons in African dance there, and now they are almost 30. So this is, I know, right? So this is when Jordan and New were like 7, 8. And so, you know, just to see it go through a process of underutilization and deterioration, it really breaks my heart, because that can be a center where we are hosting our next generation of Shock G's and Ryan Coogler's and Cat Brookses and Ayodele Nzingas, and it could be a facility to do so much more than what it's doing right now. So that is one of my commitments, and it's a mission of mine over the next 3.5 years to really make sure we get that space completely functional and operational for Oakland's young people and Oakland's creatives of all ages.
You remember that was where I lived when I first moved to
I know.
Malanga.
I remember.
And that actually will provide a nice segue into the next thing I want to talk about. And that's sort of the state of Oakland right now. So when I moved to the Malanga Center, nobody told me, and not to the Malanga Center, to the apartment complex next door. Nobody told me that I was moving next to an arts complex. And they certainly didn't tell me that there would be drumming from first thing in the morning till very late at night. I remember my first week in the apartment, this was when my daughter was, you know, Jaden was baby. And nap time was really hard. And I remember it being Sunday and they started the drumming. I was like, whoa, Sunday too, yo. But you know what I never did, Carol? I never asked them to stop.
That part.
I never said you're disturbing me. Right? I moved into that neighborhood. This was a part of, I adapted.
Right.
And I think that's one of the challenges, right? We're seeing here in Oakland is that people come for the culture in theory, they come for the diversity in theory, they come for, right? But we've seen so much tension, like specifically, let's talk a little bit about the lake, right? But when we're expressing that culture at an hour or in a manner that a lot of newcomers are not appreciative of, it becomes, it's been increasingly becoming, you know, war. And really it's a war on Black folks, Black expression, Black art, Black culture, Black talk, Black, I mean, they tripped on a church. Remember when they called the city about the church?
Pleasant Grove.
Because they were being too loud. How are
Yeah.
you navigating that as a council member? I mean, you have to represent everybody, right? Natives, newcomers, etc.
It's definitely interesting. And honestly, I think what's happening at the lake is more complicated than just an attack on the culture. There are definitely, y'all know, we got our barbecue Beckys and our Karens and whatnot at the lake. But what's happening, I think, is that there is behavior, and I know for a fact, because I've been told this by different law enforcement agencies, that there is activity happening at the lake that violates the noise ordinance hours, that violates the municipal code, that is actually problematic, and they're not enforcing it. I've been told this by a few different law enforcement officers and more residents that I can count. that the amplified sound goes on late into the night, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And so I think it's important to separate out what is racist complaining and people who are really against any kind of cultural activity at the lake, and people who are just like, wait a minute, I'm cool with all of that, but some of this stuff is extra. So I think it's important to bifurcate those two conversations, because honestly, we're saying, I've been told by captains that, yeah, we're not enforcing that. We're not dealing with that. I'm not going to let my officers be harassed by residents or be accused of being racist. So in order to avoid that, we're not dealing with that. And I'm like, that's problematic too, because then people are just experiencing, some things that are problematic, and you all are letting it happen and then saying it's because of the city council members. So it's complicated.
I guess I have questions. So you know where I live. I'm not going to say where I live, but I live across from a housing complex with our folks, and they like to give concerts every day, all day, every night, all night. But I've never, right, I've never come to council with it. I've never called the housing authority. I haven't figured out, right, what the abolitionist practice to address it is yet. But I do wonder, like, what sort of transformative justice pathways do you think that we could try to implement, or have we implemented, to get to a place that doesn't use police, doesn't use the carceral state, and everybody's needs get met?
I think there need to be some group agreements that everybody is on board with about how to utilize the space that benefits as many people as possible, right? So I think if folks want to have amplified music, yeah, that's cool, but we got to agree on when that's going to stop, because I got to know when I can plan my nap time for my baby. I got to know when I can actually rest. People are sheltering in place. So, their workspace is their sleep space. And so in order to rest, then people need to have an assurity of when they'll be able to do that peacefully. And also it comes to a question of class and access, because some people don't have that ability in the neighborhoods that they live in. They don't have yards, they don't have parks that they can access. So they need public space to go and just be free and be open. So I think it's going to come down to community actually agreeing to what works for everyone. And you might have to compromise a little bit, but I think community coming together and setting what the rules are, so we have a baseline to enforce, I think is important. I think, vending has been blamed for the incidents that have been happening at the lake that are not palatable for some people. And I think it's problematic to blame people who are out there actually making a living, trying to make a living for some of the other activity that's happening. So we need to find sanctioned places for people to be able to vend. I would like to open up every vacant retail space that is on, public property, like the vacant spaces at the Port of Oakland, the vacant city-owned places in downtown, for people to be able to vend in an ongoing way. Because as we know, COVID exacerbated what was already problematic for Black people. Black people have had double-digit unemployment in Oakland for forever. And then just COVID made it worse. So we got to figure out how we can support people in their task and mission just to exist and make a living. So there are a few things that I think we should do.
And if people really think about it, right, the people that are really, sort of pushing up on the vendors, that's a public safety strategy, right? Because what the economic pandemic has done is push more and more people into the underground economy, right? Because they, lost their jobs, et cetera. And so this is a legit way that folks are trying to make ends meet, that will keep them from having to make ends meet in other ways. Because people got to eat and they got to have a roof over their heads, and that's just the bottom line, yeah?
Right.
All right, I'm gonna, it's an old subject, it's a sore subject. but we've made a commitment in my organization and in our allied organizations to beat back this lie until it's dead. So that means I'm gonna talk about it ad nauseum, and I'm I'm assume that each time we do that, we're reaching at least one more person with the truth. Councilmember Carol Fife, was the Oakland Police Department defunded?
Oh, you really want to have this conversation?
I so do.
And I think what we need to do in order to answer this question unequivocally is define defund. It's able to be used in this political way as a weapon that we defunded the police because we have not defined what defund actually means. There is no agreed upon definition. So if you want to, you can say that Oakland was defunded. If you want to, you can make that work because you're using a different definition. But in terms of the concrete taking funds away from a department, that did not happen. The police budget was increased by $38 million. So just in the merits of what to fund and to take away funds means, then no, the police were not defunded. But if you want to talk about the long-term implications of not utilizing the suggestions of Mayor Libby Schaaf and increasing the number of police academies, increasing the number of all of the things that she was suggesting in her budget, I will say that year one, the council president's budget recommendation and the mayor's recommendation was very similar. Year two, it was worlds apart. And so what people are not doing is talking about the nuance. And that's leading to a lot of confusion, and it's allowing OPD and the OPOA to fearmonger. But just on the numbers, Oakland Police received $38 million more in this budget than they had in the last budget.
And you and I talked about this on Upfront, when this all sort of popped off initially. And I asked you, probably in the process of banging my head into a wall, why people lost their minds about investing in prevention. If the goal is to reduce crime, if the goal is safer streets, if the goal is less dead people, why would the people that are tasked with making sure that happen be so angry that there was significant investment, historical investment, in preventing the crime from happening in the first place?
People are scared and they don't know what else to do. And those are for the well-meaning people. There are people who are very clear that police academies do not increase safety, that they are by and large a loss for us in terms of the millions of dollars that we just burn as a result of having officers that don't make it through, that quit or leave or transfer once they actually pass the academy. And once there, they don't stop crime from happening. But we have not created an alternative system to make people confident that a different world is possible. So there are people who know that folks are scared and are taking advantage of that fear and using it as a weapon to say, look at what they're doing. This $18 million could have gone into having more police officers. To do what though? I mean, because it's not helping. And so once we actually invest in $18 million is a fraction of what the community deserves. It's a fraction of what we need to actually save lives. And we could do so much more. The number of officers in OPD is just a fraction of the number of individuals that are actually engaged in criminal activity in Oakland. It's a small number of people who are doing the dirt. And oftentimes these folks doing the dirt are doing that because they have been broken by this system and don't have many other options. Nobody is a child and is going to school and saying, when I grow up, I want to be a criminal. I want to risk my life. I want to potentially end up in prison. Nobody aspires to that. But when the community, and I say this quote, this African quote all the time, the child that does not feel the warmth of the village will burn it down. Something like that, to Phillips Warren. The child who is in the public schools in Oakland, who does not have access to resources, they don't have the supplies they need to be educated, their teachers are underpaid, they have constant substitute teachers, there's all this filth that they have to walk through or get to just to go to school, and the systems are broken from the beginning. Their families don't have the resources to give them the quality of life because they don't have access to living wage jobs, they don't have access to quality housing. That child has been broken or traumatized, and we have to wade through all that trauma. But if we invested in them to begin with and laid out a subsidized life the way that a lot of our white friends have had, because this culture has supported white supremacy, because it's a white supremacist system, then the outcomes would be different. But they don't want to level the playing field because crime pays. It pays really big. The underground economy pays people very well.
Right, and the way that I've been building off of that conversation I had with you, I've been using this talking point everywhere. Anybody will let me run my mouth, but I get real specific, right? It pays in terms of contributions and elected officials war chest, campaign war chest. It pays for bloated police budgets. It pays for the ownership and operating of private prisons. Black death literally commodified. And part of what's been painful in this process, right, is watching the repeat of the 80s and 90s. In the 80s and 90s, after our community was flooded with crack cocaine by the state, then right, and then all of the violence ensued that happens when a community is in crisis. And then the state came and sold us our demise as the only pathway to safety. And we were begging for the 3 strikes law. We were begging for the 1994 crime bill. And then we were devastated, right? Because Black bodies continued to drop, but we were in so much worse of a state because our families were ripped apart. One of the key vehicles for creating community safety, right? Whole and healthy families. We're devastated. And the same tape is playing again. And I've been slowly sort of piecing it together and looking back and watching the setup. And part of the setup, I believe, was for this latest call by Libby, by Carl Chan, that has brought in what I'm calling a trifecta of state terror into our community. We've got the FBI, we've got the ATF, and now we have the murderous California Highway Patrol. We're supposed to help with traffic stops. My understanding, Councilmember Fife, is that that wasn't done in partnership with council, that the Schaaf administration made some decisions with this community member. And here we have it. Is that accurate? And you're a study of movement, and you're a study of the enemies of the movement. You're concerned that these are the agencies that are now flooding Oakland streets with Black people, let's just be honest, as the target.
Absolutely. And it's extremely concerning to me. Can you hear my dog?
I can sure hear Miss Pam.
Pam, good grief. Should I stop her? Should I go get her?
If you can, yeah.
And look at Luna just chilling back there.
Yeah.
Like a good girl. Look, that's how Pam should be, Luna. But she stopped. So not only should the city council be concerned, but residents of Oakland should be concerned that a series of actions are happening in the city administration with the executive of the city, the mayor, that are consistently bypassing the elected leadership of the city to make decisions. And it's based on fear. It is not based on data, because if we followed the data, then we would not be creating national, state, and local laws around hate crimes for our Asian family members. It would be for Black folks, and that you would bring in people that are impacted by the trauma of these agencies to help determine what the solution should be. there have been hundreds more incidents of hate crimes against Black people than any other racial group in the state of California. But we're not getting press conferences, we're not getting solutions, we're not getting conversations with the governor, and let alone, not just the governor, but the mayor. It's not happening. And we keep investing in solutions for a small percentage of the population that's engaged in this, type of activity that's causing all of this fear in our communities. And I don't understand, with the hundreds and millions of dollars and the thousands of law enforcement bodies that exist and are being brought in, that they still cannot get a hold on a proactive approach to keep people safe. And if that's not happening, and they're calling on community, because I hear this endlessly, we need the community to help us to fight crime. Well, the crime is disinvesting in our communities. And the more you pay yourself an additional $38 million this year, then the less money that we'll have to address the actual things that are harming our communities. So bringing in CHP was not done with the council. There was one council member that it was done with, but it was not the majority of the council. And we don't even know who's paying for it. What are they doing? What leeway do they have? Are they citing people? Or do they have arrest case? What are they doing on Oakland streets? Has there been accountability? Do they have to abide by the same negotiated settlement agreement that the Oakland Police Department has to abide by? We don't know anything because we were not included in the conversation nor the decision. And that should be very concerning to residents of the city.
I'm wondering, we only have 3 minutes left, but I'm wondering if you've thought at all in terms of, figuring out how to push back, how quickly, once you all are back in session, you could maybe pass some legislation like Berkeley City Council did, which was limit the reasons that people can be pulled over, and increased the paperwork, right? The reporting of when folks are pulled over. I wonder if that's something that council could do to try to interrupt some of this madness, because we know, say his name, Eric Salgado, we know that increased contact is increased danger for our people. And we've got, I literally, my body was covered in chills when I read that in the paper. I was like, we're Black people, we're in trouble.
Yeah, we're in trouble because they are criminalizing mental health and stigmatizing and criminalizing mental health issues of Black folks that are in the streets by increasing hate crime laws that, once again, do not show the statistical reasoning and rationale for doing that. This is an attack on Black folks. 70% of the homeless population, probably 80% or more, are the folks living in the streets who will be targeted with hate crime laws if they engage in any type of activity that is indicative of a mental health break. So we need to be paying attention to that. Once again, the numbers went up to 107%, but we need to be looking at the concrete numbers. How many people have been impacted by hate incidents, but they are actually having mental health breaks. We got to look at that, because once again, the numbers show that Black people are the primary individuals that have experienced hate crimes in California. So why are they doing that? Why are they bringing in the FBI and passing laws, but that are not targeted to support Black folks? It's to criminalize us. When an answer could be open up more hospitals, right? Create more mental health supports, have housing, social housing for unsheltered people to live who can't afford these ridiculous rents and mortgage costs in the city. There's all kinds of solutions that we could implement if we invested in them. But their goal is to lock us up and put us back in chains and cages like we were in slavery. Because when you are in prison, when you're incarcerated, slavery is legal. I'm working on legislation right now with Oliver Sanan to end slavery in the state of California. So we're passing a local resolution and a state resolution to make sure that we end the slavery in the carceral system. So there's a lot of things we can do to address the people who are on our streets that are in the throes of mental health crises. There are things that we can do to impact the violence that's in our neighborhoods, but we've got to stop with the violence that starts at the top and trickles down to impact us all.
Final question for you, Councilmember Fife. Where do you see hope?
Honestly, I see hope in the youth. There are youth that are organizing that I think are phenomenal, that are envisioning and fighting for a different future, a different reality, that are fighting to save our planet, that are fighting to create gender justice, that are fighting to create racial healing and solidarity and equity. There are people like yourself that are passing the baton to these young people and nurturing our own children and their children's friends. So that is important to me. And also there are residents who are a part of the city who are looking at what's happening and are seeing through the bullshit, honestly. And they're demanding something different. So I see hope that people are not fazed and are not moved by the same propaganda and fear mongering and lies, frankly, that have been a dominant narrative in local politics. And I'm excited about it. But it's important that your voice now through this podcast, through the San Francisco Chronicle, amplifies what we know is true so that we can reach more people and ensure that this movement that we have nurtured for what, 20 years now, 10 to 20 years, continues, and that people see an alternative and that we keep cranking out. And I will do my part to keep cranking out alternatives so that we can have the city that we deserve, because as is Oakland, so goes the nation, so goes the world.
Right. Well, I look forward to continuing to imagine and implement those alternatives with you, Councilmember Fife. Thank you so much for joining me this morning and for everything you are and everything you do so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was great.
Y'all, we've been talking to City Councilmember Carol Fife, who represents District 3. This is part of BAM Fest, Cats Commentary. We've been doing it every Monday at 11 a.m. BAM Fest we're halfway done, but we've got 2 more weeks of incredible programming for you. You can get more information at bamfest.com. There's one event I definitely want to highlight. It's tomorrow night. It's called Black to the Future. It's at the Oakland Museum of California. First of all, you get to go see the amazing Afrofuturist exhibit that they've curated. It's amazing. Historical I didn't know W.E.B. Du Bois was an Afrofuturist. I had no idea. I learned that in the exhibit. They've got Octavia Butler, of course, June Jordan. It's amazing. And then you get to hear our very own poet laureate, Ayodele Nzinga, San Francisco's poet laureate, Tango Ayson Martin, and Richmond's poet laureate, CC Gervais, spit fire at you for 45 minutes. It'll be catered, wine, music. Mia Pixley will be playing the cello. It's going to be amazing. Go to bamfest.com, get your tickets. All right, y'all. Be blessed, stay healthy, love yourselves and love each other. Peace.